Why? He wanted to speak the truth. You see, people, they set up for themselves prophets, and it talks about it in Timothy, and it talks about it in Jeremiah, where we set up ourselves up for prophets to tickle the ears. We want people to give us a good word and an encouraging word, something that's going to get us going, it's going to keep us motivated. We don't want to hear the truth of what it is. And when the Father talks, oftentimes we distance ourselves and we'll run to someone who's going to speak to us what we want to hear, not what the Father wants to hear. And it's that distinct voice that we try and set ourselves up so that we don't get a backlash, because we don't want to be reproved. We don't want to be set straight. We'd rather be lied to, as Franz was saying, about believing that lie where men come to lie, just like the spies that were sent out. And that was just one portion that he gave me. And then he when we moved on, and he was saying about asking for whatever you ask, just for the sake of asking, he gave me James 1 verse 7 to 9. Just want to go there quickly. He gave me James 1 verse 7 to 9. It says, "For that man should not think that he shall receive whatever from the master. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. And let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation." So what the Father was explaining to me here is saying is that you need to understand that the Father is not going to give you everything. And if you do think that you, like he's just said in Scripture, you're double-minded. You see, because if you read in, I think it's in Romans 1, there's a story of people where it says, they served the Father, but because they were stuck in their ways, the Father gave them over to their own hearts. And you see how a couple of verses later, how they become so perverse in what they were doing, is that men started sleeping with men and women with women. And this is where the Father says, all the issues flow from the heart. If your heart, the Father wants your heart. He doesn't want it's not what you say that makes you righteous, it's what you do. And that was my other verse I was still going to go there. That was in Romans. I have it here. And too many times we get caught on this path where we want to do these religious works. I call it religious works is because it's not coming from the heart. It's something that we're doing for the sake of doing it, because we think it makes us right in the Father's eyes, and it doesn't. It's not what you do. It's not what you say that makes you righteous. It's your halakha. It's walking out your belief with a loving heart. That's why the Father says you need to get a new heart, as he speaks. And I think it's in Ezekiel or Jeremiah, where he says, the Father says, remove this heart of stone.
Ezekiel 36.
Yeah, it's Ezekiel 36. Mom just said now. And this is what the Father was speaking to me over there, saying is that too many times we want to do all these mighty works, and we're looking to please the people around us, not knowing what the Father is actually requiring of us. Sometimes he wants us to be quiet. Sometimes he doesn't want us necessarily to speak, because we need to be in sync with him. Because what were the rabbis doing during Yeshua's time? And he warns about it. He says they look for the highest of seats and with the longest of tzitzit, but inwardly, he says they cup inwardly. If they make the outside of the cup look all nice and grand, but what's on the inside? Because from what's in the inside is going to flow out. It's where you are. The Father, that's what the Father's looking. Seeing is, where are your fruits? Where are your priorities? What are you focusing on? Because where you put your time, and that's who you're going to become as a person. And the Father, he's looking for people that are going to put aside what they want in order to do what he wants. It's about his timing and what he requires of us. And the last one that I'm going to finish with was with as we're talking about the belief, was Matthew 14, verse 22 to 31, was with Peter, when Yeshua allowed him to go out on the boat, and he came out to meet them, and they said, "Is it you?" And Peter still questioned it, and he said, "If it is you, let me walk on water." And he came out, and he stepped onto the water, and he was walking on water. And then what caused him to stumble? He started looking left and right. What had happened? He started to fear. That fear grabbed him, just like the spies when they went into land. The Father told him that is their land. But what happened? They went there and they wanted, as Francois was explaining, they were looking and they saw that they were mighty men here, and this is going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem. Not knowing that the Father's already given the victory into their hands. They feared for themselves. Why? It's because they reasoned amongst each other. Like when they came back, there was how many? 2 gave a good report and another 10. 10 gave bad report. Why? Because fear managed to grab hold of them. There was that fear of not knowing who they serve, not knowing that Yahuwah fights their battles. It's not about them physically fighting their battle, the Father's already set out the battle and He's going to win it. It's just a matter of you believing and trusting Him that you're going to go out and take what He said you need to take. And it's the same thing that happened to Peter. He walked out knowing that he could. He started walking, but then what happened? He lost sight of what he was focusing on, and he looked left and he looked right. And that's when he started to sink. It's because he got the fear of, but why, how am I? And then that's when he started to sink. And it's the same thing that happens in our lives, is that when the Father gives us an instruction, we start doubting and reasoning amongst ourselves and start sitting and saying, but Father, how am I going to do that? This is going to be a problem. Not knowing that the Father's already given us what we need. When He gives an instruction, He says, go out and do it. There shouldn't be a second, like a doubt, so to say, like the fear that Francois was talking about. So, yeah, that's what the Father was just sharing with me.
Okay. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
You know, every week, as we work through the Torah portion readings, there's always something that the Father is going to be able to highlight in the sense of the times that we are in. And we need to understand that I think the time is now that we need to be able to look at these Torah portion readings not as, oh, it's just reading the Torah portion reading. We need to understand, because we are in an hour right now in the sense of what is the Father saying right now to His beloved people. Because time is of the essence, and as we are in the preparation, just in this week, Father gave me a word. On Wednesday, I was sharing with the ladies' meeting, and the Father has got me starting a series where He said, what does it mean to return back to eat from the tree of life? What does it mean to return back to the Garden of Eden? So if we are in a time of where we're supposed to raise up as this bride for the Father, then that means that we are to be a bride that is going to once again eat from the tree of life, and not from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And this is when the Father started to speak to me, and He said, you know, Natalia, there are many people that are eating from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and this tree is what makes them feel righteous. And this tree is what makes them feel that they are close to the Father. And this is all they've known. And this is what they've done. But what He shared with me was the fact that, you see, we've just had Shavuot. You know, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we celebrated Shavuot. So now we are in a time of preparing for the next feast. Because now we've come into the time again where we're preparing for the next feast. So we prepared from Pesach. We prepared ourselves with first fruits, and then we had the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then from there, straight after first fruits, we started to count the Omer, leading up to Shavuot. And everything about Shavuot was really to be able to go into a deeper introspection. And then we received the fire. We received the fire. We received the Ruach of Yahuwah. But now, Father said to me, okay, so now that we have received the Ruach, what is the purpose of having received the Ruach? What is it about? What is the purpose? So you see, many of us want the Ruach of Yahuwah so that we can do the great exploits. Man, we want to heal the sick, we want to raise the dead, we want to do all these great exploits, which are the gifts that the Ruach has placed there. And we saw the disciples walking in these great gifts. But what we need to understand is that, you know, sometimes we can have a very high call, but it's not to say that our character or our fruit of the Ruach is in the same place as the gift. So, you know, someone can walk in the gift and the gifts will operate. Because when the Father gives a gift, He doesn't take it back. So, if you, for example, have a gift of raising, of healing, where you can, pray for the sick and they get healed, you can have fallen off the track. You cannot even be a person who's really truly walking with Abba Yahuwah, but that gift is going to operate. And so people look at people according to the gift that operates and think, wow, that person's so anointed. But what did Yeshua say? You will know them by their fruit, not by their gifts. Because if I give you a gift, and the gift that I give you, I cannot take it back. So if I'm going to give you a gift, I can't come to you afterwards and say, well, now give me your gift back. And that's when we receive the Ruach of Yahuwah, we receive gifts that goes with it. But I have found that when it comes to the fruit, that comes with a price. The fruit is not just cultivated in us. We don't just all of a sudden arrive and now we are patient. We're not just going to all of a sudden arrive and we have love. We're not just all of a sudden going to receive the Ruach of Yahuwah and it automatically, we're going to have that long suffering. And it's interesting how the word says, Yeshua learned obedience through his suffering. And like we discussed last week, that even when Quibba spoke and he said how the menorah had to be beaten, how there is, for us to reflect a light, there is a process that we need to go through. And so this is now once again what we're going to see in this Torah portion reading, because what the Father said to me is, he said, Natalia, from now until Sukkot, what is the next? We've got Yom Teruah coming up, we got Yom Kippur coming up, and then we got Sukkot. And Sukkot is again the longest feast. But what is the Father requiring from us of the preparation that we are in for Sukkot? And that is the fruit harvest. Because what is the harvest that comes in? We just had the wheat harvest. And this wheat harvest was when we just celebrated Shavuot, and Shavuot was about the wheat harvest. Then we had the first fruits before that, and that's our first fruits offering, which is the barley offering, which was Yeshua became our first fruits offering. And now we just had the wheat harvest. And so we need to be prepared now to bring in the wheat harvest, to bring in the harvest for the Father. But you see, for us to bring in this greater harvest, we first need to look at what tree are we eating from? What fruit are we bearing? Because I can tell you now, if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there's no life in that. There's no life in that. And that's what got them to be able to be kicked out of the garden, because they ate from that tree. So you see, you might think that before the Father you can stand so righteous because you have certain gifts in your life that operate. But that's not to say that that's the fruit, because the fruit needs to be cultivated. And this is exactly why he took them into the wilderness. Because you see, they had come out of Egypt. And they were not quite walking in the fruit that he wanted them to bear. And we need to see this. And that is why I'm saying, as we are reading through these Torah portion readings, we need to see ourselves. You know, in the beginning I used to say, wow, Father, how did you put up with these Israelites? Have mercy upon my Father, because these Israelites were seriously enough to be able to get anybody to get upset. But you know what? We are no different to them. We just need to do great introspection and we'll realize that we are no different to them. Because if things don't go our way, which is exactly what Francois was preaching, how do we behave when we have an expectation of how the Father's supposed to behave on our behalf? You know, just like I keep saying, like when I arrived at the airport, I had an expectation that I'm going to go in. Because if he told me to buy other air tickets And if he told me not to rush it and that I had to go when the day was that I had to go, I had an expectation. And the expectation was, well, I'm going to enter in. And when I didn't, how did I behave? I came to see the fruit that was in me. And the fruit was anything but good. Because I got angry. I got upset. I was disappointed. And I sat there, and all of a sudden everything of what I stand for is just gone out the window. And not only that, I got a devil in my ear telling me, so where's your father now? And you've just missed the plot altogether. You don't even hear him. He doesn't even speak. And now I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, well, Father, where are you actually in all of this? And the only thing that really changed my stand, which is what we see here, if we look, let's just go look at this, Numbers, chapter 13. And I just want to read so that we can see exactly what has happened over here. In Numbers chapter 13, from verses 27, it says, and they reported to him and said, we went to the land where you sent us, and truly it flows with milk and honey, and and its fruit. This is its fruit. So they saw that it was a land of milk and honey. They saw with their eyes that this is the case. But the people who dwelt in the land are strong, and the cities are walled, very great, and we saw the descendants of the Anak. And the Amalekites dwell in the land. And look and see, their father raises up a leader. Caleb is trying to say to them, silence the people, and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are certainly able to overcome it. But what happens? We saw the Nephilim. In verse 33, we saw the Nephilim, the sons of the Anak of the Nephilim, and we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so were we, and so we were in their eyes. And this is really what I want to say, because you see, when I sat there in that airport, and the Father said to me, what if it is my will that you had to go through all of this? You see, that changes everything. What if it is my will that you are to go and possess this land? If the Father told them that you are to go in and possess the land, it's His will. And if it's His will, then nothing around you should be a thing that you should be looking at. Because He's already given the instruction. Now, if He gave the instruction, whatever's going to come out of that, whether you're going to die in the hands of those Nephilim, whatever it is, it's His will. And you have to submit to His will. And so when He said to me, so what if it is my will, Natalia, that you were to go through all of this, and you're going to go on a round trip, 48 hours. And he said, now, what did you want to do here? I said, I wanted to pray. He says, so yeah, you are, pray. But you see, this is what I want to share with you today, which is already like what Francois mentioned. See, we have choices. We can either look at something in the evil way, or we can look at something in a good way. You know, when I was told, when my son came to me and he said, Mom, I'm sorry, the people here are complaining, not them, but people complained, you need to leave. I could either look at it at one of two ways, which, I had my little cry. We're all human. We're all flesh. I had my little cry. Okay, now, once again, Father, I'm being kicked out. What have I done? I haven't even done anything. Or you can look at this and saying, okay, Father, it's time to move. The cloud is moving. It's time to move. Do not judge the people for what they're doing. Do not get upset about the people. Don't worry about the fact that they don't want you to be there. It doesn't matter. But you see, when we are in our comfort zones, when we are happy where we are, and we are comfortable where we are, it's not always good to be able to, it doesn't always cater to the flesh when we now all of a sudden got to get up and leave. It doesn't feel good. And this is exactly, they were now just getting comfortable. Now they're going to go and take possession of a land where they're seeing the Amalekites. These are the Nephilim. I mean, hello, these are giants. They got every reason. I want you to understand. They had every reason to fear. You know, they had every reason to fear because they saw them. But you see, are you going to see with the eye of your flesh? Or are you going to see with the eye of Abba Yahuwah's magnitude? What is he doing in the midst of all of this? He's already gone before me. He's already going to flatten the mountains. What did he do to what did he do to the Egyptians? Did he drown them in the Red Sea? What was the plagues that they saw? But you see, this is how we all do this. We had one of two choices of here. We were either going to be able to see what is at hand, or we're going to see through the Father's eyes. Because at the end of the day, whatever the Father asks you to do, it's because He's trying to reflect Himself to the people. And that's what's so interesting when we go to Joshua. Let's just go to Joshua now. I want you to see, by the time they get to Joshua, a different scenario. Because, they are seeing the people and they are fearing, as opposed to hearing the fact that their father goes before them. Abba Yahuwah is the one who's going to go before them. Abba Yahuwah is the one who's going to destroy the giants on their behalf. He's the one who's going before them. He's the one who's going to conquer the land for them. He didn't say that they are the ones that are going to have to fight. He says, I will fight for you. What did He say when He parted the Red Sea? What did He say? I will fight for you. You will hold your peace. He's the one who parted the Red Sea on their behalf. And that same mindset is the mindset that they should have had. But that's not what's happening. They're looking at the giants. They're looking at everything. But look at what happens in Joshua. Let's go look at Joshua chapter 2 from verses 9 to 11. And it says, and she said to them, now the men, they've gone again to spy the land. They've gone into Jericho, they've gone to spy the land, and they're going in to see now to be able to conquer the land. They've once again gone to spy. But look at what happens this time. They meet up with a woman, Rahab. And now in verse 9, she said to the men, I know that Yahuwah has given you the land. Oh my goodness! This woman is not even an Israelite. She is not even a believer. She's part of those that are in Jericho. But look at what she says. So much is the report of what's gone forth about who Abba Yahuwah is, that listen to what she says. I know that Yahuwah has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of you. Wow. Now isn't that what the Father wanted them to be able to do all along? It wasn't about them. It wasn't about them conquering the land, about them. It was about the fact that He's the one who goes before them, and He wants to show Himself strong on behalf of the nations of the world. So you see, everything of what the Father does in your life is never about you. But you see, we make it about us. It's never about you. It's about you being able to be that vessel that He wants to show Himself strong on behalf of the nations of the world. Because you have been called to bring glory to His name. And they said, for we have heard how Yahuwah dried up the water of the Sea of Reeds. Now imagine, they were going into this land. These people had already heard about what the Father had done for these Israelites against Egypt, the most powerful nation. He'd taken them out. Now imagine, if He's telling them, go take the land. If Joshua's saying, and Caleb's saying, let's go, take the land. You see, remember, the very thing we're fearing, what you don't understand, is those people might be the very people that have already heard about the Father, and they will, instead of you thinking, oh, I can't do this, I'm not going to be able to do this, those people had already heard about what Abba Yahuwah had done through these Israelites. They knew the one whom they served. They knew that He was greater than Ra. They knew that He was greater than all the gods that these people had been serving. They knew that. So, for we have heard how Yahuwah dried up the water of the Sea of Reeds for you when you came out of Mitzrayim, what you did to the two sovereigns of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you put under the ban. And when we heard, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in anyone because of you. For Yahuwah your Eloah, He is Eloah in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. So do you see? Imagine this. The very ones that we're fearing, they are the ones fearing our Yahuwah. And He's needing a people that's going to go and conquer. And this better be an example for you today. You know why? Because those same Nephilim giants that they were afraid of, those same Nephilim giants are the ones that are going to come in the form of many things that's going to come in these last days. They're going to come in the form of, right now, it could be a coronavirus, it can be a vaccine, it can be a test, it can be whatever. But we need to understand that these giants that are going to go before us, even if the famine comes, even if all these plagues are going to come, we need to understand the one whom we serve. We need to understand that He's already gone before us. He's already made a way for us. He's already made a way so that those giants will be able to be, they understand when these things are going to come through, they're going to come upon the earth, all these plagues that are going to come upon the earth. Abba is going to have a need of a remnant that's going to have the boldness of Joshua and Caleb, that is going to have to say, don't fear. What are we fearing? If we're going to need to go out and get food, are we going to fear the fact that there's going to be a plague? Are we going to fear the fact that there's going to be whatever? We are going to have to, in the face of the most difficult time, have to put our trust and our faith in the one who goes before us and know that He's the one who's going to cover us and protect us. If He tells us, go. If He tells us, go, then we are to go. But you see, it's the attitude that we need to have in the times that we are in. We need to have a change of mind. And that is why it's all about the fruit. And it's all about obedience. And which fruit are we eating from? Are we eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Because if we eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, our religious ways are not going to stand in the days ahead of us. Those religious practices that we've been so accustomed to, they're not going to stand. You have to have cultivated a relationship with Abba Yahuwah, and you have to know who He is and what He's done in order for you to be able to stand. So we need to understand that when the Father showed me this, isn't it interesting? Look how interesting it is. They were 12 tribes, 12 spies. 10 brought an evil report. 2 brought a good report. There's 12 tribes of the house of Israel. 10 that went into the dispersion. 10 that went into the nations that got intermingled, interbreeded into the nations and lost their way. And 2 faithful tribes. And we see it already here. 2 faithful tribes that remained. 2 faithful people that said, let's take the land. But what happened with the rest? 10 that in the end, if you read the account, they die. And so at the end of the day, what was also interesting was if you look at Joshua, what tribe does Joshua come from? Father provides, Father goes ahead of us, Father makes provision. So even though the 10 are going to go astray, but He's restoring the house of Israel and the house of Yehudah. Now look how interesting it is. Joshua comes from what tribe? He comes from the tribe of Ephraim, which in the end represents the 10 lost tribes. And Caleb, where does Caleb come? Caleb came from the tribe of Yehudah. That is the 2 tribes that would have remained faithful, that Yeshua came from the tribe of Yehudah. But there is Joshua that comes from the tribe of Ephraim. which is going to be made up of the nations, that's going to need to come in, which again makes up the fullness of the house of Israel. And so we see how the Father, even in this, already here, the Father is showing us how there's 10 that fell, but He's going to once again bring those 2 sticks to become one. The 2 sticks are going to become one. The house of Ephraim and the house of Yehudah are going to become one house, and they are the ones that are going to take the land. They are the ones that are going to be faithful to conquer. They are the ones that are going to be able to come into the fullness and take the land. And so here already we see the prophetic coming forth, where we see how the 2 faithful ones are the ones that are eventually going to take the land. And that is why I'm saying there are many who are first who are going to be last, and many who are last who are going to be first, because just because of your religious stand doesn't mean to say that you're going to stand in these last days. It's going to be those who are faithful. It's going to be those who are going to be willing to walk with their Yahuwah and to be obedient to Him in everything He asks them to do. They're going to be obedient. Because if we're going to look at Numbers 15, this to me was so powerful. Numbers 15 verses 15. It's interesting because some of you might say to me, yes, Natalia, but this was for the Jews. You know, this is for the Jews. This is not for us. You know, we are Gentiles. You know, this isn't really for us. We don't have to keep the ways of Abba Yahuwah's Torah. But let's look at what he says in Numbers 15:15. One law. So let's just read from verses 14. And when a stranger sojourns with you, or whoever is among you throughout your generations, and would make an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahuwah, as you do so, He does. So as you do, He does. Look at what he says. One law is for you of the assembly and for the stranger who sojourns with you. A law forever throughout your generations. As you are, so is the stranger before Yahuwah. One Torah, one right ruling is for you, for the stranger who sojourns with you. So do you see? So for those of you that want to turn around and say, well, you know what, the Torah is really for the Jews. It's not for the stranger. The stranger was with them. If you are returning back to Abba's house, then you will be able to come back into Abba's Torah, Abba's ways, Abba's commands. And how can you turn around and say, well, I'm a Christian, and therefore it's not relevant for me? Even the stranger that sojourned with them, because they were with them, they were part of the same house. So what house do you belong to? Are you just a house that is eating from a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that which looks good, I'm going to eat from that tree? And you have all your religious customs, all your religious traditions that you do. And you've done all these things for as long as what you have. But at the end of the day, are you one that's coming back to His house? Are you coming back to eat from the tree of life? Because you see, obeying His commands, there was one command in the Garden of Eden, that was, you shall not eat from this tree. And even that, they did not obey. Now He gives us His commands. He gives us His Torah. He gives us His instructions for set apart living, for holy living, and how to be set apart. So how do you plan to be set apart unless you are going to come back to His ways? And here we see clearly that even the sojourner, there was one law for both. So Father has not said there's one law for the Jews and one law for the Gentiles. He says there's one law. If you're returning back to Abba's house, then you obey Abba's rules. That's the way it works. There isn't another way. And so that really stood out to me. And so that is why we look and we see in Galatians. I want to go to Galatians, because what fruit are we bearing? Because at the end of the day, this all brought that brought about in Numbers, this that we see, this rebellion of these people, is because of the fact that they are bearing a fruit that is not Abba's fruit. And so let's go to Galatians chapter 5, and let's go look at the fruit, because I think it's very important right now in this time that is ahead of us, in leading up to Yom Teruah, when the trumpet is going to be sounding, going into Yom Kippur, leading up to the next feasts that we're going to come into, that we are in a time that we truly need to examine our fruit. We need to examine our fruit. We need to see, are we just being religious? Are we just going and doing what other people do because this is what they taught us to do? Or are we truly serving the Father because we love Him? Because we're led by Him? Because we are obedient, because He's working it in you both to will and to do His good pleasure? What are we doing? Because at the end of the day, this is what the Father wants us to look at in this time. So I am proposing to you, which is what the Father's been telling me now in this time, where He's saying, I want you to return back to the Garden of Eden. I want you to eat from the tree of life. And now I'm saying to you that in this time where we don't have a lot of time left, I mean, we're already halfway through June. And we've got July. We've got August. And then September's on our doorstep. And September is now when we come into the next feasts. So in this time, Father is challenging us and saying, I need you to look at your fruit. I need you to see, are you a fruit? Are you a tree? Are you eating from what tree? What tree are you eating from? Are you eating from the tree of life, and am I your source? Or are you just trying to please me in your religious rituals that you do? Are you just trying to please me? What are you doing? Because this is the challenge that the Father is trying to put before us. And so let's go look at Galatians. Galatians chapter 5. And where it says, he says, I say, walk in the Spirit, from verse 16, sorry. Walk in the Spirit, walk in the Ruach of Yahuwah, and you shall not accomplish the lusts of the flesh. So you see, in last week's Torah portion, we saw them being confronted by the lusts of their flesh because of the food that was not there. And they wanted the leeks, and they wanted the garlic, and they wanted the, oh my goodness, they wanted the quail, they wanted the meat, they wanted everything. They wanted the lusts of their flesh was to be fulfilled. Now this week, we are seeing a little bit deeper, other fruit that is being exposed. And that is now we fear. Are we fearing Abba Yahuwah above anything else? Or do we fear man? Or do we fear the systems of this world? What do we fear? And he says, walk in the Ruach, and you shall not accomplish the lust of your flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Ruach, against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are opposed to each other, so that you do not do what you desire to do. What did Paul say? The things that I want to do, I do not do, and the things that I don't want to do, I do. And there is a war going on within me. But how are we going to overcome this war? The only way to overcome this war is when you start to do what the Bible says. Submit to Yahuwah. Resist the enemy, and he will flee. But the first part is submitting to Yahuwah. Submit to Yahuwah and to His word. Submit to the fact that if He says, okay, we're going to look and see now. But if you are led by the Ruach, you are not under the Torah. Now please do not see this as being, I'm not under the Torah, in meaning that the Torah is not being done away with. it means that the Torah of Yahuwah is my guideline for me. So Torah, I walk it out. It's my guideline. But these people can twist the scripture to make it say, but I'm not under the Torah, so I don't need to submit to Torah. And now listen to what the works of the flesh is. Are well known, which are these. Now listen. Adultery, whoring, uncleanness, indecency, idolatry, drug sorcery, hatred, quarrels, jealousies, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, murder, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like of which I forewarn you, even as I also said before, that those who practice such of these shall not inherit the reign of Yahuwah. So I really would suggest, which is what I'm doing right now, what I suggest we do is we need to take each one of these words and we need to look at them in depth and in detail to be able to see what these words mean and what we are doing. Are we abiding? Are we walking? So we understand that we're not walking in this. But look at what he says. But the fruits of the Ruach is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no Torah. Because when you walk in that, you walk in the fullness of Torah. You walk in the fullness of Torah because that is what Torah is. We are supposed to be the Torah walking out our halakha. But you see, we can want to twist scriptures to say, but we don't need the Torah. How will we know how you should live if you don't have the Torah showing you what those Israelites did for you to be able to know that we are to learn from them? And so that is what I want to leave us with today, is to be able to leave us with the thing of saying, we need to look and see what is the fruit that we are displaying within our lives. Do we have that love? Do we have that joy? Are we the example for people around us? Are we fearing what is going on? Or are we going to be bold and take a stand? Because you know what? We need to get to the place of understanding that we might even have to die for our faith one of these days. Do we love Abba Yahuwah enough to be able to know that, just like I said, Caleb was saying, let's take the land. Doesn't matter what. This is Abba's will. This is what he told us. We are to take the land. He said, I've given you this land. So if he's given us the land, then we are to walk and take it. And even if it means that we die in the process, so what? If it was his will, it's one of those things. But that's the change of mindset that we need to have. And it's like I said, just like with me, when I sat in that airport, it was the change of mindset when I had to get to the place of saying, okay, so what if this is Abba's will? It was Abba's will that I was not to return to Israel. It was Abba's will that I am to be here where I am right now. And praise the Father, you know what, I can thank him. I can't thank him enough for being here amongst the community, amongst the people that do love Abba Yahuwah. And that we can sit down and we can share the word. Every night we sit down, we read the word. Sometimes like this week, we spent the whole night just on one chapter of the book of Mark because we're busy reading through the book of Mark. We spent the whole night just chatting about one chapter. Because this is what it's about being with one another, about sharing the word, about us learning from one another and being a light where Abba wants us to shine. And so I leave you with that today. May Abba bless us all in this time of our Shabbat as we continue in this Shabbat and we continue to be a light that needs to shine for him.